The following is an excerpt from the According to Metal podcast. We couldn't just do this review with me and Biv because we had to do it real proper like, and I'm going to introduce to you not only a fan of the show for some reason, but the editor of LadyObscure.com. She's been with them 2 years. She's awesome. She is all things metal and a bag of chips. Our good friend Lacy Mucklow joining us here to do a proper review of Circus Maximus, and let's be honest, just add some class and credibility to this podcast. Lacy, welcome to According to Metal.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
All right, Lacy. So, you, of course, were one of the privileged and, lucky people to have this album weeks before I did. So, you've got a chance to digest the most recent Circus Maximus album, Havoc. Again, we just played a snippet off of the album for everybody. I'm going to start with you, Lacy. Let's dish. Let's talk.
Okay.
What are your thoughts on this album?
I marinated on
you're
this
a big
one for
fan.
a while.
Go ahead.
For sure. And it grew on me a little bit, but my first impression was kind of, what are they doing? The more I listened to it, I realized that I really enjoyed the second half of the album more than the first half. I realized there was kind of a split there. And the first half seems very experimental to me. Like you said, the title track, Havoc, when it first came out, prior to even when I got the promo, I was listening to that and I looked at my player to make sure the right song was up because it, like you said, it did not sound like them at all. It sounded like Marilyn Manson, pseudo-industrial metal, and they're a progressive metal band. So I wasn't really sure what was going on. They'd already released a couple of other singles before Havoc that were a little bit more in the vein of the normal Circus Maximus sound, but I didn't know what was going on with this Havoc stuff. So I finally listened to the whole album, and I was kind of mixed about everything. The previous three albums to me were pretty solid. Each one I loved for its various reasons. Each one was slightly different. The first two kind of were similar. 9 kind of diverged from that a little bit, but I still liked their sound. So I was kind of anticipating more of a 9 sound on this album because the way I felt is 9 was kind of they're settling into their trademark sound. The first two albums were a lot more Dream Theater influenced. And they have a different keyboard player starting with 9. So I thought, that's kind of, they're finding who they are. They've discovered their musical identity with their original music. And they've kind of streamlined a bit. They're not quite as epic as they were in the first two. But, I like it. It's kind of cool. And I thought that's what they were going to pretty much stick with for this album. So I was really surprised when they started getting into, some more different and experimental styles on this one, and I don't feel it's as solid as the other three.
I don't either, Lacy, and you touched on a lot of things that I actually was going to talk about it as well. I mean, Circus Maximus essentially started as a cover band of Dream Theater and Symphony X and stuff like that, so you can clearly hear in the first chapter and in Isolate, you hear those first two albums and you go, okay, definitely progressive metal, very heavy. There's a couple tracks that clearly are heavier than others, but you know it's metal. I mean, you definitely know it's progressive metal. You know what you're getting there. And then you heard 9, and I'll never forget this because, of course, I was a Circus Maximus fan going into the album 9. Reach Within, if you remember, was the first single. It comes out, and you go, okay, a little softer than I'd like, catchy. But not kind of what I was thinking. But all right, I'll hold reservations. But then you heard, tracks like, Architecture of Fortune, Namaste. It was heavy. It was still metal. I mean, you got that, part of what you were expecting from Circus Maximus. But then they did other stuff on 9. Game of Life is one of my favorite songs they've ever done.
Love that one.
I Am the One, even Last Goodbye, which is not really metal either, but ends the album in a very, very good way. So you to your point, 9 was definitely an album that was, you were hearing the real, I'm not trying to be a cover band influenced by Dream Theater Circus Maximus album, and I can dig that. What ended up happening, at least in my opinion, with Havoc, and you hit a lot of things the nail right on the head. When I first heard The Wait, that's the opening guitar riff. I could play that with my wang. I mean, it was something that there was no intricacy whatsoever. These guys are incredibly talented. And you heard the way the album opens, and you hear the way that the album, and if you've heard the show before, and I know, Lacy, you know where I'm going with this. I am a huge proponent. If I were in a metal band, or any band for that matter, I still believe in the power of an album being a story and the full album having some meaning. So you better start off strong and you better end well. And I simply do not understand how The Wait is the first track off of this album. It makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. It's a boring track that does nothing for me. I've listened to it I don't know how many times, and despite trying to like it, I just can't. Am I missing something here?
I don't think so. I think they started off weakly. I mean, usually the first track on an album, you expect to pull you in, be like, oh yeah, I'm in for the ride on this. And it came off, it's like, it's okay, but and then the next songs after that kind of got worse to me. And then after kind of the halfway point, it started picking up again. And I think some of the better gems, if you want to call it, are later in the album. But, I don't know if they're going to hang on to listeners, for instance, that far into it. I really don't know if they're going to start skipping tracks, and check the whole album out anyway, or, give it a shot all the way through or what. But I didn't think their choices, especially up front, were maybe the wisest.
Well, to your point, Lacy, I hear Dances with Wolves was a great movie, but I can't get past the first 45 minutes of Kevin Costner sitting in a tent and staring out in the woods. I need something to pull me in quickly.
Yeah, it took a while.
And I think that
for somebody like me who's not a Circus Maximus fan, although I love the genre and I do respect their talent, this album, I give them credit for trying something new, trying something different. But they strayed so far away from their sound that I think they not only lost their existing fans, I think they failed to pick up any new fans.
That's kind of my concern, because I think I have a more extended review that'll be online. But what I get into is, if people want to know, okay, hey, who's Circus Maximus? What do they sound like? I wouldn't refer them to Havoc.
No way. Yeah. And I can't see any progressive metal fan turning this album on and going, oh, hell yes, this is great. I don't see that at all.
I think there's like one or two songs that I'm like, I like these pretty well, but that's like one or two.
And they're not even, here's the thing. I talked to Biv about this a little bit offline. And it's funny because we've had no conversation about this, Lacy, whatsoever. The last 4 tracks of the album are my favorite as well, and the album is essentially split into, how many tracks are there on the album? I think 9, maybe.
There's 9.
Okay, the last
plus
4
the bonus track
are my favorite ones, and Loved Ones, though the least non-metal album or non-metal track title of any song I've ever heard in my life. It's a great track. Really, really good song. And even though, but it's not, I mean, let's just be, if we're being honest with ourselves here, because we're being honest with not only ourselves, but hopefully our listeners as well, it's not a metal song at all. I don't care what anyone says. It's not even close. It's a great song.
It is a great song.
But don't go into it going, oh, man, that's a great heavy metal song. Progressive metal at its best. Nope, you won't hear it there. Same thing with Remember. And this is one thing I want to touch on, which is related but not related. And Biv, we talked about this a little bit offline. Don't underestimate the power of a good music video. Because the video for Remember is one of the better, and I make fun of metal videos because most of them are awful. Let's be honest.
In an abandoned warehouse.
Yeah. If you owned an abandoned warehouse and you're looking for some cash, reach out to metal bands. They will gladly rent it from you to shoot music videos, okay?
Especially these days,
Yes, they'll absolutely. If you have, developed abandoned warehouses in Detroit, reach out to the metal community. I'm sure they'll gladly take them off your hands for a couple days at least. But Remember's a great video. Really, really good. And I find myself, even though Remember is a good track, but I'm just going to, this is just my thoughts. I'm curious what yours are. I find myself liking that song more, not because it's a good song or any better than any of the other tracks on the album, but that song, every time I hear it, brings me back to the video, which is outstanding. Am I wrong here?
I don't think you're totally wrong. I like the track pretty much as it was, but the video really gave it a storyline, and it was kind of futuristic and forward thinking. And it brought up memories and emotions and those kind of things that I think added something to the song. It gave you a context, so I think the video definitely enhanced it.
Yeah, I mean, the last 4 tracks, Loved Ones, After the Fire, Remember, and Chivalry. Chivalry's really good, too. And, again, ends the album well, but it's still not a metal track. I mean, if you're expecting metal on this album, folks, you're not going to get it here. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. If you're one of those people who's like, metal or nothing, even though the show's according to metal, I get it. You're going to be really, really disappointed and pissed off, quite frankly, if that's what you're expecting. Because don't expect to get it. You're not going to get it. But can't wait to read the full review from you, Lacy, on LadyObscure.com, because you do amazing work, and we're glad that you joined us on the show, because to Biv's point, the reason why we wanted to have you on is because this was one of my, when I'm looking at doing a show, this is the, what is this, Biv, the 4th episode that we've done?
Yes, it is.
One of the reviews I looked most forward to as we were starting to put together, okay, let's do a show. We're going to do album reviews. I'm like, dude, Circus Maximus has my album coming out in March. I'm just telling you right now, we're reviewing that shit the day it comes out. And that was kind of my thought and opinion about the whole thing. And so to have that build up in my mind and then to have this be the finished product, that's all I can do is sigh. So what are your thoughts?
I will
if you
say
had to
it's
give
been
it
on
a
my
0 to 5 scale, Lacy, what do you got?
I'm sorry, a 0 to 5. I'm giving it a 3.5.
Okay. And
which is low for me. I'll put it that way.
I'm going to say 3. That was actually what my rating was. So if you went to American grade school, if it's 3 out of 5, which would be 6 out of 10, that's a D minus, folks. I'm sorry, but that's just how and
I'm going 2.
Whoa! Oh. Now that's crazy town, but
it is. But okay, keep in mind. Now I'm coming from a different perspective than you guys are. At least the albums previous, I could respect it for what it was. They showed their talent. I feel like this was a complete waste of space for them. It's
a good point in a way, Biv, because I will say this. Lacy, let's try to challenge ourselves with something. Let's pretend we picked this album up for the first time knowing no idea who the hell these people were. Would we rate it 3 out of 5 or 3.5 out of 5? I don't know if I would, if I'm being honest.
Or look at it this way. If you went out, let's say you were a big Circus Maximus fan, and it's the old days before the internet, and you went out to wherever, the local record store, Tower Records or whatever, and you paid $17 to buy this right off the shelf because you knew you loved this band's previous works. And you took it home and you put it on and you sat there with your lava lamps and listened to it. Would you be upset that you just spent $17 on this?
Yeah, I would have rather say, okay, I think I would have rather bought it in the used bookstore, CD store. Like, I'd still keep it just because, but paying $17-18 for it, not so sure.
Yeah, and Lacy, we also learned that Biv listens to all albums and with his lava lamps. I don't know if you caught on that.
That's right.
I didn't know that, but whatever works.
Yeah, fluorescent lighting. I still have the Holy Diver, felt poster. That's me.
Cool.
Well, Lacy, really. Thank you so much for joining us on According to Metal. We really, really love what you do, and I know that you're a fan of the show, which we really appreciate as well. But for those listening to the program, want to know more about Lacy and where they can not only read your writings, but also kind of follow you on the interwebs, how can they do that?
Well, of course, you can go look on LadyObscure.com, and you can read my reviews and those of my teammates on the site there. And you can find me on Facebook, Lacy Mucklow.
Very cool. Lacy, thanks so much for joining us here on According to Metal and being the residential expert of Circus Maximus and, quite frankly, just giving this podcast a little bit more class and dignity. We appreciate it.
Well, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
To check out the entire episode or previous episodes of the According to Metal podcast, simply click subscribe on iTunes, SoundCloud, or the podcatcher of your choice. It's the According to Metal podcast. Latest news, reviews, interviews, and all things metal. Subscribe. You know you want to. That is, unless, I don't know, you like Coldplay or something.